What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Files Podcast, the podcast that wastes hours of your life that you are never getting back. I am your host today, Spencer, joined by Lewis. How do you pronounce your last name? I don't want to butcher it.
Yeah, I mean, let's go. Listen, I usually just tell people to just say Magellan, which is the English version, right?
Magellan. Okay,
Yes,
okay.
that's it. Just anglicize it because it's a very weird sound. I mean, it's about as hard as Andrzej Sapkowski, which is another right, which
Yeah,
is another hard sound.
yeah, for sure. So
Andrzej,
is it Luis? Your first name is it
yes,
Luis or Lewis?
Luis,
Okay, Luis.
Luis. That's
Okay,
easier. You just do
Luis.
the ish at the end, right? Right.
Okay,
That's
Luis.
easier.
Awesome, I like that. Well,
Yeah.
I am joined by my friend Luis here, who is an author, and we will tell you more about his books in a little bit here. But I will start by telling you guys that we are going to be talking about The Witcher today. Not anything specifically, like we're not talking about like a book specifically or the game specifically. We're just kind of talking about The Witcher. This is something that I have picked up in the past week, or at least the books. I've played the games for a long time. I watched the show, all of that. But this past week, I picked up the books, and I was kind of like thinking about what kind of video I wanted to make. I was just going to sit in front of a camera and just record something talking about general thoughts on The Witcher. And then Luis had commented on a couple of my Twitter posts, and I was like, "Oh, he's really into The Witcher. Like, let's bring someone on to kind of bounce ideas off of while I do this." So, really glad he's here. We're gonna have a great time talking about The Witcher. His links will be in the description. So if you'd like to check out his books or his Twitter or anything like that, I will have them down there. Also, of course, our links are down there if you'd like to reach out to us on Twitter or Discord or whatever. We also have a Patreon that you can support us on, and you get to watch these episodes live as we record them weeks before they go out to YouTube. So if you'd like to come on and chat with us and bounce ideas off of us while we're recording, then you are welcome to do that over there. But without further ado, I guess let's talk about The Witcher. I don't think I have any other big announcements or anything, but this does kind of mark the start of our book content that we're going back into after the new year. So hopefully you guys enjoy what's to come. We got some King's Dark Tidings content coming soon, and we'll be going back into Harry Potter and Stormlight. So hope you guys are looking forward to that. But Luis, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your books?
Yeah. So I'm Luis. I enjoy writing heroic fantasy. Right.
Mhm.
That's heroic epic fantasy. I'm very. I mean, I don't have a lot of free time. I've never had, and so I really I like what I like, and I don't diverge too much away from it. So
Mhm.
basically, uh, I grew up reading heroic fantasy and epic fantasy and sword and sorcery. I enjoyed reading enough that I started writing stories of my own, and eventually I decided I wanted to write a book. Right, it's been I had my career. The career went in a bit fits and starts. Right, I wrote my first book. I'm bilingual. I've spoken English and Portuguese, side by side since I was 4 years old. But
Mhm.
because I was living in Portugal at the time, I wrote my first book in Portuguese. That was 10 years ago,
Mhm.
and it went quite well, right, for the Portuguese market, which is incredibly small.
Yeah,
So
sure.
that it was definitely, but I just the whole experience just left me exhausted because at
Mm.
that time the only way to sell books was to get a truckload of books right in your car's luggage compartment and go off to book fairs and events and sell them, and that was very exhausting.
Yeah.
um, but I really enjoyed doing it, and I felt like I really wanted to develop my heroic fantasy universe, which is called The Legends of Elysia. And I just it was just a bit. too much, right? Doing the whole selling books shtick was a bit too much. But 2 years ago, now it's going on 2.5 years ago. When my kid was about to be born, it just kind of dropped. Right, the idea just kind of dropped that if I'm going to be setting an example for this kid, am I going to say that I gave up on my dream of being a writer just because it was too much work?
Mm.
So, and that made me go back to the books.
Hmm.
I had published another book, the first Legends of Felicia book in English in 2019, and then proceeded to be amazed that no one bought it because I didn't know what I was doing. The book was, I don't want to feel conceited saying that the book was good, right? But I
Sure.
feel that the reviews back it up. I've been blessed with having nice reviews and having people who quite enjoyed the book, but because I had no idea what I was doing in terms of marketing, it sold like zero copies. And then I was
Hmm.
like, okay, I guess this isn't working. But then, when the time came when the kid was about to be born, I just thought that I needed to give this my real attention and a real shot.
Yeah.
So since then, since 2022, right, I've put out there 8 more books. I've been writing 4 books a year, and I basically don't do anything but my day job, being a parent and write.
Mm.
Right, and I've been people have been enjoying it. I've been seeing a moderate amount of success. I'm not nearly close to being a full-time author, but it's nice. It pays for groceries. It pays for nights out with the wife. It's
Yeah.
shaping up to be a nice hustle, a nice side hustle, and
Nice.
hopefully one day it can be one day I can make my kid proud and say that I'm a full-time author. That's the goal, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think that is, that's a story that we've been hearing a lot on this podcast, and it's really crazy to hear just the differences between self pub and or yeah, self
Yeah,
pub and trad pub, because we've had both on the podcast, and there's been some authors that have come on that we've never heard from again because they kind of gave up on it.
it's
And
hard.
yeah, matter of fact, our first couple interviews were with people that they came on and they talked about their book, and then we never heard from them again.
Yeah.
And it's really sad because, usually when we have somebody on, it means that we've read their book.
Mhm.
And, some of those books, like, we really enjoyed, and we would have really liked a book two to that series or a book three. Um,
Yeah, I don't
and,
think I can quit, to be honest. Right,
yeah.
after this, right, after writing like essentially 3 to 4 books a year for 2 years,
Mhm.
it's just quitting for me now. Look, it's like becoming J.R.R. Martin, and instead
Yeah,
of putting 4 books a year, it's putting 1 book every 4 years, right?
right.
That maybe, right, if it ends up that I can't make rent, right,
Yeah,
doing this, I'll probably just scale it down and
sure.
write a book every few years, right? And
Yeah.
I hopefully my fans will be along for it, right? Because
Mhm.
that's some right now I was just writing an email to my newsletter, right? And over the past 2 years, I've had like I have about 1,000 people that are there for me. Right, I know it's not a lot, but
Mhm.
they're my 1,000 people, so I appreciate
Yeah,
them.
for sure, of course.
and and it's like you kind of feel like these people are really invested in my stories, in the world I created, in the characters are created, in the heroes, right? That
Mhm.
they've followed these heroes through their own stories, right? Some of my heroes started as not great people, right? Some of them started off as heroes, but there's, I mean, I write heroic fantasy, so there's an heroic tone to it. It's not grim, it's not dark. It has elements of grim and dark, but ultimately it's about flawed people doing what's right, doing the right
Yeah.
thing, and that connected. That's connected to people in a way where it's there's something really nice when you start getting fan mail and
Oh yeah.
people start talking about your characters and your world, and you're like, and then I get to a point where I'm like, yeah, well, I can't quit now, right?
Yeah,
Maybe economic realities may make me scale it down at some
sure.
point, but I don't see myself disappearing, right? And that it
That's
would take something very extreme for me to disappear.
Yeah, that's kind of how we feel about the podcast too, is, for a long time we were putting out this podcast and there was nobody watching it. And we would get like, we still don't get like a ton of views on every single episode, but the people that are there, we figured out, we had kind of forgot how long we had been doing this for, and then this last Christmas we realized that we've been doing it for 4 years. And the there's people that keep showing up and keep commenting. And this past year, we've gotten way more comments on our videos than we ever have before. It's
Yeah,
actually kind of hard keeping up with them now. And, we were kind of thinking the same thing, like, how do we ever stop doing this? Like, you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
there's people that, we've become friends with and that we talk to regularly, and there's people that watch and comment, and it's like, man, it feels like I don't know if we'll ever give the podcast up, which is kind of cool to think about, where it's like, oh, maybe this thing is forever.
yeah,
And that's a great feeling. Sometimes it's a little bit of an overwhelming feeling, but it's overall a good feeling, I feel like.
yeah, for sure.
Do you want to talk real quick about like what your series is about, like what the basic premise is?
Yeah, okay. So let's do that, and then let's go on to The Witcher, because that's
Yeah,
what people are here for, right?
sure, sure.
But so it's essentially an heroic fantasy series, right? It's in a medieval secondary world, right? The world is called Alessia, and the main premise is that magic is returning to the world, and it's
Mm,
about how the characters deal with the reappearance of monsters, of supernatural entities, of gods, of goddesses, right?
okay.
Etc., and how that shapes the kingdoms and countries of
Mm,
Elasia. And like I said, by heroic fantasy, I mean that its scope is it's a bit less, a bit more limited than an epic fantasy, right?
yeah,
There's not so much, power games, royal plots, etc., right?
yeah,
It's more focused on quests, though sometimes, there are still wars, there's still large scale battles,
sure.
and things like and things like that, but it's definitely more about the hero's quest. As far as heroes go, I enjoy having heroic characters, but in terms of growth, right? I do like having a variety of starting places.
Yeah,
So I mean, most of my characters start off as pretty normal people, right? I haven't done yet, though. I have plans to do the whole, character starts as a farm boy and then grows in power, right, and becomes a, a real hero, right?
sure.
That coming of age story I haven't yet written, but I do have plans to write one. But it's usually, people are leading normal lives,
Hmm.
sometimes, as a mercenary, as a thief, as a bit of a scoundrel, just as a knight, just being a
Yeah.
guard in a town. And they're called to serve, they're called to adventure,
Hmm.
and eventually, right, they, even though it might not be in them, to do the right thing, they're not the people you expect to be heroes. But
Right.
when push comes to shove, right, they choose to do the right thing. So
Yeah.
people like to try these days, the people try to make fantasy, they have this whole
Try to
subgenre
make
and
it too
terms
big.
and themes. No, I'm saying, for example, people have asked me, oh, so are you normal because you have heroes, are you noble bright? And I'm like, yeah, I keep sticking to heroic fantasy. If you push me, I'll say epic fantasy, right?
Mm,
But I don't like those. Oh, it's grim dark or noble bright, or it's complicated, right?
sure.
I don't
Yeah,
like
it's
I don't
complicated.
like to create expectations that the story is going to go in this direction or in that direction, or the character is like this and this and that,
Yeah.
because I feel that part of what makes the story special is the growth, right?
Yeah.
Is you starting with someone that looks like it's going to head the next direction, and then it adds in Y direction.
Right. I love that. I've been, we've read some big fantasies this past year. We've been reading Stormlight,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I don't know how much I enjoy like the big sprawling epic fantasies anymore. I feel like there was a period of my life where I
Hmm.
really did enjoy those big stories that were like, tons of characters and like all of these plots interweaving. But I think as I've kind of, especially over the past 4 years that we've been doing the podcast, I feel like I've kind of refined what I like a lot more. And I think I do enjoy a more like linear story
Yeah.
with, that leans more towards heroic fantasy, focusing on, 2 to 3 main characters. And yeah, that's great. So do you have audiobooks?
No, no, I don't have audiobooks at this time. I haven't been able to make business sense of making them yet.
Sure. Okay. Okay, cool.
Right. So
Well,
it's only written, right? Paperback and ebook. That's it. That's it.
nice. Okay, cool. Well, I will have links to your books down in the description, so if anybody would like to check those out,
Yeah.
then please do.
Yeah, I
Uh,
do recommend people start with the daughter of. People ask me this all the time because there are so many books, and in reality, I have several series, and people can start to any of them. But people always come back to me and ask for a starting point,
mhm.
and I usually so I've defaulted to saying that the Daughter of the Ice is probably the best starting point. It's not the first book chronologically, right?
Mm.
But if you start by it, first you get a good sense if you're going to enjoy my writing and all the other books.
Yeah.
And actually, the books that are before it chronologically still are more interesting to read right after you've gone through the Daughter of the Ice. It's
Okay.
also the part of my current ongoing series, which is called Age of Rekindling, and just yesterday I finished the draft of the last book. So
Very
yeah,
nice.
it's this the series is hopefully, if everything goes well, right, need to ship to send it to my editor, to my proofreader, but I expect to have it out at the end of February. So that will
Very cool.
conclude the series.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Yeah, I tell people all the time, because we're big Dresden Files fans on the podcast, and I always tell them, I'm like, start with Deadbeat. It's like the sixth book in the series, but if you start with Deadbeat, you will know if it's going to be a series for you or not, and then if you
Yeah,
like it, you can go back and see how it all kind of started. But Deadbeat was actually written because it was the Jim Butcher's publisher came to him and said, "Hey, you're getting your first hardcover, so we need this now that your books are going into hardcover. We need this next book to introduce people to the Dresden Files again because there's going to be a lot of people that are just seeing this on, the Barnes and Noble shelf for the first time." And so you need to be able to introduce people to it. So he kind of wrote it in a way where you could jump on at that point and fully understand. So yeah, I
yeah.
totally get that.
Yeah, and sometimes series are a bit. For example, when I wrote the prequel for the Daughter of the Ice, right, which is called Blades of the Ice, I did it as a bit of therapy because I
Hmm.
had just gone through this gauntlet of writing and publishing a big heroic slash epic fantasy book,
Yeah.
and actually that was a book. The Daughter of the Ice did not have the best start. Right
Mm.
now it's actually my best selling book and my best performing book, but the first
Nice.
few months were rough.
Hmm.
Right, so I was kind of down, and I wrote the prequel, right, as therapy. I really enjoyed writing that book, but I
Hmm.
wrote as I finished it and published it. I realized that it wasn't the best representation of what the story is about, right?
Mm.
Because again, the Daughter of the Ice is an epic heroic fantasy, party
Hmm.
based quest,
Yeah.
right? Where a group of people, join together and go on a quest. And the prequel ended up being like an assassin slash heist story. So that was not, so,
That's
so
kind of cool.
sure. Yeah, but if you get it right, if you get, it's enjoying it does not mean that you will enjoy the rest of the series and vice versa. It's just too
Right.
different.
That's fair. That's fair.
Right. So I usually
Well,
steer people away from the prequel. Right. If they like my writing style and my characters, then they go back to the prequel and they'll enjoy it because it's a bit
right.
more of the characters that they like. But
Yeah,
it's not the best way to start.
that's fair. That's fair. Well, let's talk about some Witcher.
Yeah.
How did you get into The Witcher, and what are your just kind of overall thoughts on the IP in general? Just like
Yeah.
the franchise in general.
So I got into The Witcher in a bit of an unusual way. Like many people, I got into The Witcher due to the video games. I think that
Yeah.
most people is like that. I mean, the books were only as far as I think. Maybe some research will show I'm wrong, but I think that the books were not even translated in their entirety. I think there was only one or
Oh,
two books translated by the time The Witcher games came out.
okay.
But yeah, but so it was with the video games, but most people actually got into The Witcher with the second, most people with the third game, some with the second.
Yeah.
I actually had the opportunity to get into The Witcher with the first game because I had a
Oh,
friend that was a big PC gamer, and that
yeah.
game was only out on PC and
Mm,
recommended it to me. So yeah, that was where and I had no idea, right, about the story that came before it. But after that first game, I enjoyed it so much that I went and looked for the books and started reading them. And I was really taken in by Sapkowski's prose, right? I think he's very unique, right, in a way that you don't see prose like his, these days.
yeah. Did you read it in English, or did you read
Yeah,
it
in
in
English.
Portuguese? Okay.
No, I read all my books in English. Portuguese translations are terrible.
Are they?
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
that's
they're
funny.
awful. Right? I read The Hobbit in Portuguese when I was a child, and it was traumatic.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Or is it? Oh, it's just a black screen. It's not letting me show it. Dang it.
yeah. Black Screen is not the best. No,
I was gonna show
the first game.
the early Witcher games. Yeah, they're so interesting. I have
Yeah,
not played 1 and 2. I've played 3. I don't
two
know
is
if
quite good. Two is still quite a good game, right?
really.
Especially if
Okay.
you play it in the PC, where you can put the graphic to the max, right? And on the Xbox, it looks a bit dated, but on the
Sure.
PC, it still looks great, right?
Okay.
The first one didn't age so well mechanically. I think that's why they're remaking it.
Yeah. Oh, are they? They're doing a
Yeah,
remake?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
They're doing a remake of The Witcher one. So yeah, but it was fun. What I mean, maybe we can talk about this now,
Hmm.
right? But the thing that caught me by surprise is that after reading the books, right, I got Witcher one, and then I read
Hmm.
the books, and when I finished reading the books, I'm like, wait, this now Witcher one doesn't make sense. The game doesn't make sense after I finish reading the books, and,
Sure.
and that's when I figured out that the games are essentially fan fiction. They're
Mm.
not canon. They cannot be canon, right? Either the book version of the story is true or the game version is true, right? You can't have both cannot coexist unless you do some pretty gnarly
Yeah.
it's some pretty gnarly narrative twist, which the games try to do.
Yeah.
Right, but yeah, the witch the Witcher books end with a pretty definite end and fate for the characters,
Okay.
and then the games kind of rewind it a bit, right? And they do a
Interesting.
justification, right? There's an in world justification for that,
Yeah.
but yeah, this was brought up recently because there was a big controversy about the new trailer, The Witcher 4, never not being faithful to the lore of The Witcher. And I
Yeah.
can see it both ways, right? On one hand, yeah, I agree with a lot of the criticisms aimed at the trailer. On the other hand, playing devil's advocate, the
Yeah.
games were never that faithful to the lore of the books anyway,
Yeah,
right?
that's what I kind of assumed, is
Yeah,
that they already weren't like super
yeah,
super faithful. And so I didn't really understand a lot of the backlash. Like I understand the lore reasons why people were kind of
Mm.
upset, but I'm like at the end of the day, like don't we all just want more Witcher video game? Like
Mm.
like
If it's
so
good, yeah, we want good
like
video games.
like even if they have to explain how Ciri is a Witcher, it's like
Yeah,
Ciri is the obvious choice for the next main character because Geralt has like a definite end at the end of Wild
yeah,
Hunt, and Ciri, she's the obvious choice, and she needs to be a Witcher somehow. Otherwise, it's not a Witcher
yeah,
video game. And so it's like, yeah, we got to figure out a way for her to drink concoctions and all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
And so yeah, and again, I'm not like, or at least I wasn't a huge fan of the books yet. I hadn't really read them. I'd read like a little bit, but I wasn't super invested in the lore of the
Hmm.
books when the trailer came out. Um, and so I was just like, I don't know. It just like doesn't really upset me at all. I'm like, we have to connect A and B somehow, and they're gonna
Yeah.
figure out a way to do it. So
Well, I'm not gonna lie, I was slightly upset,
really,
but just a little bit of nerd rage, just
sure,
because I don't know. I just
sure,
feel it could have been handled better, right? Right? Just it's.
yeah.
I mean,
I
sure, Geralt had a definite end, but there's so much else to do. Just make a Witcher game that explores the time before the books, even, right? Go
Yeah,
back to a time where there were several Witcher skulls active. I don't know.
yeah, that'd be
They
cool
didn't have to
too.
do this, right? They
Yeah,
didn't have to do this. It's not like
or they could
Ciri
have,
was such a loved character from the games, right?
yeah, or they could have done like a young like Vesemir or something. That would have
Yeah.
been cool too.
Actually, you're in book 3. You're at book 3, right? Blood of the Elves.
Yeah, so I guess I'll
Uh,
explain that real quick. Is so the past, I don't know, week and a half, I had gotten back from Christmas
mhm.
vacation and I was like, I need something to read.
Yeah.
And I had started playing the Wild Hunt again. I've played it all the way through with all the DLCs and everything once before, and I was like, it's time for to replay that game. And so I booted it up and I was playing it, and I was like, man, I feel like just spending more time in this world. And I was going to work and thinking about the game while I was at work.
Yeah.
And then, kind of fortuitously, on YouTube, The Last Wish popped up just as an audiobook in its entirety on YouTube. And so I was like, oh, why don't I just like start listening to this? And if I don't like it, then I'll just go on to something else. Now, I had tried to get into the books previously, but based on some like Google search I did or something,
Hmm.
something I learned online was that The Blood of Elves was the first book. Now, technically, it is the first book in like the Witcher story, but
Yeah.
Last Wish and Sword of Destiny are all of the little short stories that get you to the point where you understand what's going on in the Blood of Elves.
Yeah.
Um, and I was familiar enough with the characters. I knew that like Ciri was at Kaer Morhen. I knew who Triss was. I got the context of what was going on. But at some point, I forget when exactly, but at some point I DNF'd it because I was like, I don't know, I'm not following this anymore.
Hmm.
Um, and so this time I went back and I read The Last Wish, and then I immediately went on to Sword of Destiny, and then
Yeah.
immediately went on to Blood of Elves. And I think I only have like a couple hours left in the audiobook. I'm at the point where they do the little flashback showing Yennefer picking up Triss for the first time from the priestess at the temple.
Mm.
And she's like taking her to examine her and teach her how to use her magic and stuff. Um,
Yeah. You mean Siri, right? You said Triss. You mean Siri,
oh,
right?
sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
Yennefer picking up Ciri.
Yeah. The
Yep,
Temple of Melitele. Yeah.
yeah, and uh, and yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at in the third book, and
Yeah,
I just wanted to talk more about this series. I use that in place of the word franchise, because as I've been reading these books, I've been binging them. Like it's all I've been listening to the
yeah.
past like week or so,
And that's a
and
great way to do it, by the way. That
yeah,
they're kind of hard books.
hmm
Because, again, that's what I
yeah,
appreciate about them. They're not dumbed down books. They're not
yeah,
books for people with low attention span, as so many books are today,
I
right?
know,
They are, they are complex. They have complex books with complex prose,
yeah.
and you really need to jump from one to the other one, right?
Yeah,
Otherwise, you'll just forget, stuff.
I know that's exactly what I was thinking when I was going through it. I'm like, I think I just need to go on to the next one because I'm gonna
Yeah,
forget everything that happened. And my co-host Gabe, he wouldn't mind me saying this. He knows it's true. He has a very low attention span, and so a lot of the books that
as do
he
we all these
reads,
days,
yeah,
right?
exactly. So a lot of the books he reads are very like action-packed, like very
Yeah,
fast-paced, like modern books. Um, and he was asking me the other day, I was telling him, I'm like, man, I'm loving the Witcher books. I'm loving them so much, which is like a complete 180 from when I was listening to it before. Because even when I was listening to
yeah,
Blood of Elves before, I wasn't really enjoying it. I was like, this is fine. I'm not really enjoying this that much.
yeah.
But I
I want
was,
to. May I interject with something,
yeah,
because this
of
is
course.
something that I wanted you to talk. What was How do you feel the book after playing the games, and I assume watching the series? That's another thing altogether. How do you feel the book match your expectations? Because I feel that a lot of people, especially not so much the short stories, because they're short stories, but
Hmm.
when they get to the Blood of the Elves, I feel that a lot of people are expecting something action packed, something like sword and
Yeah.
sorcery, heroic fantasy, and that it's not at all, right? I think Blood of the Elves is like one sword fight, maybe two, right? Something
Yeah.
like that. It's a much more leisurely paced book.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so far Blood of Elves, I've really liked the character moments where it's like two
Hmm.
characters talking to each other and having a
Yeah,
discussion. But a lot of the like plotting and like politics, like there's that one scene in Blood of Elves where it's all the sorcerers and sorceresses, and they're trying to figure out, they're like,
yeah,
okay, we need to find Yennefer, we need to find Ciri, we need to like kill Geralt, and what are we gonna do about like this next king? Like, who are we gonna put on the throne? All this stuff. There's all this plotting behind the scenes, and that just
yeah,
like did not really interest me at all. I
yeah,
really like the moments with Geralt when he's interacting with Ciri or interacting with Triss, or like the last scene that I just paused before I hopped on here with you is when Ciri is talking with Yennefer, and she's like, you can either let me examine you, or I can put a spell on you to hold every single molecule of your body still so that I can examine you myself. And just like that going back and forth, I really enjoy that kind of stuff.
yeah,
But I do think that as of right now, I like the short stories more because I think I was telling somebody the other day, I'm like, despite what anyone thinks about the game and like maybe it doesn't match up to the books exactly, I don't really know.
hmm,
But for me, like someone who's maybe a little more casual, like I enjoy the series a lot, but like I haven't finished the books, so maybe I'm a little more casual, is I was telling somebody the other day, I'm like, the games stuck to the spirit of The Witcher so well. Like
yeah,
there's this short story in Sword of Destiny where there's a doppelganger, and this doppelganger creature had taken over this little halfling guy and was like doing business for him on the other side of the city, and people were coming to the real halfling and being like, oh yeah, I bought this from you the other day. He's like, what are you talking
yeah,
about? Like, I didn't do that. And they're like, he goes and he goes to the guy that's like managed all of his financial interests, and he's like, "Oh yeah, your fortune went up by 20%," like all this stuff. He's like, "What?" And at first he's wanting to kill this other doppelganger, and so Geralt is put in a really hard position because he's like, well, this guy's hiring me to kill this doppelganger. And these like doppelganger guys have been hunted for like a long time because they messed so many things up. He's like, but it's like an intelligent species that I don't really want to kill. Like if it's intelligent and it can think and it's not just like he's like maybe
Yeah,
there's another way to get rid of it. And so he goes through that whole dilemma of like talking to the doppelganger and being like, "Will you leave? Like, can you just leave? And like, we don't have to be a part of each other's lives anymore." He's like, "I'll let you go." And the
yeah,
doppelganger's like, "No, I want to live here." And then it kind of turns into this thing where the doppelganger and the halfling are in the same room, and somebody comes up with the idea of like, why don't you say the doppelganger is your cousin, have him go manage your sawmill or whatever over in the east, and just have him run that business, and then you stay here and run this business because the doppelganger just wants to have a life.
yeah,
And so it's this really interesting conclusion where it's like, oh, how is he going to kill the doppelganger? Oh, he's not going to kill the doppelganger. And and then you find out that the fire what's the guy that group of people, the flame of faith or whatever they are, they're trying to kill all the wizards and everything. Um, and You find out that that guy had been replaced by a doppelganger as well. And it just felt, I could totally see that being a side mission in the video game. Like through
yeah.
and through, I was like, this is like straight out of the video game, or like the video game mimicked this perfectly. Like even the dialogue, everything, I could see it in my head in The Witcher 3.
Yeah, so that's I kind of feel a kinship, right? The story I told you, right, about the prequel and my first book, right?
Mm,
I kind of feel a kinship with Sapkowski on that front,
yeah,
because that's the thing, right? The short story books, they're awesome, right, in their own right. They're super fun, but I think that it's a very big departure then between them and the main epic story that it tells on the other five books, right?
right.
Just you might, it might happen that someone, right, really loves the short stories and then can't stand the epic story because it's such a departure in style and tone and everything. The
Yeah,
stories are much more light-hearted, and again, that they have a lot more action. They're just more speedy because, well, they're short stories, right? So,
yeah.
there's definitely, and that's what I was trying to figure out. If you had figured out, maybe you don't have an opinion yet, right? How was that? Did you feel that? Because I definitely felt that clash, right? When
Yeah.
I went from Sword of Destiny to Blood of the Elves, I
You
was
feel it
I
right away.
yeah.
Yeah, you definitely feel it right away.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I don't really feel like I have a major preference like
Yeah,
one over the other yet, because I think I enjoyed the short stories. I like reading short story collections. But I'm also a fantasy reader, and I read like these big series that are set up more like from Blood of Elves onwards. So it's not, I feel the clash, but it's not like something that's so new to me that I'm like, oh, I don't like this at all. I liked it the other way. So I'm
yeah,
interested to see, once it keeps going, I want to see how the story evolves, and hopefully, in the main series, there's like the occasional little side quest or something that would be fun. But if not, then I'm just enjoying the more like dramatic stuff with, they introduced Triss in the Blood of Elves, and she is
yeah.
by far my favorite character from the games, from the books so far. Like
Hmm.
I love Triss Marigold.
Yeah,
And
well,
so I'm
we disagree there. I mean, I like Triss. I don't dislike her, but I am definitely a Yennefer guy,
that's
right?
That's so funny. Yeah, my friend Chris, who's also a co-host on the podcast,
Yeah.
he was the one that got me into the game. He got me to play The Witcher 3, and I was playing through it and like texting him. This is my first time going through the game, and I didn't know anything about The Witcher because at the time the show hadn't come out. This was like way before the show, and so I was texting him like, I'm loving this game, and I'm like, I got about, I don't know, maybe halfway or three quarters of the way through the main story before the DLCs, and I was like, you went with
Yeah.
Triss, right? Like she's the obvious choice for the girl that Geralt dates. And
Mhm.
he's like, no. He's like, Yennefer is the main love interest, clearly. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no. And like, I was so shocked. I'm like, how could you? I'm like, Yennefer sucks. Like, how could you choose Yennefer? I'm like, Triss is so like nice and sweet, and Yennefer is like cold and nasty. And he's like, well, he's like, in the books, like, Yennefer is the one that he is like romantically like destined for, and so that's who I went with. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I haven't read the books, so like I just assumed that it was Triss. I assumed that Triss was like the main love interest. But I played through the whole game, romancing Triss, and then even listening to the books, I'm like, I hate Yennefer like so much. Yennefer, I cannot stand her as a character.
That's
And
so funny.
even as I'm replaying The Witcher, I was like, maybe I'll romance Yennefer this time because I didn't do it last time. And even on this replay, I'm like, nope, I'm romancing Triss.
Yeah. So first, let me opening a parenthesis here, right? Because
uh,
it seems that you're a big video game guy, more than I expected. So
yeah, yeah.
I just have you played the first Dragon Age?
Not the
No.
first one. I actually watched
Okay.
Chris play. I think it was Dragon Age 2.
Okay, so that's a
I
different
like
thing. So,
sat
so
and
the thing
watched him play
about
it.
the Dragon Age games is that they don't know what they want to do with the series. So each
Oh,
game has a
what?
radically different turn. So
Yes, every single one is very
yeah,
different.
so the new one is I don't even know what that is,
Oh God,
right?
it's such a
Yeah,
disappointment.
yeah, but they all have it's like a superhero game in the Middle Age. I don't know,
Hmm.
and the other one was a bit of a party team. Let's go, let's have a fun adventure kind of vibe. The
Right.
second one was more dark, more gritty, etc. But the first one is very uh, Witcher kind of inspired in terms of the way the world is, right?
Okay.
It's a more realistic kind of medieval world, and it's if you enjoy the Witcher setting, I think that Dragon Age One is a game that you will enjoy. So that was just a quick,
Okay.
sidebar that I wanted to put out there,
Very cool.
uh, because I definitely felt that. I felt that game was made by people who read Sapkowski and loved it, right?
Oh,
And
very
then the other
cool.
games are a complete departure from that.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but anyway, I really you talked about the destiny, right? The book is called this. There's the last wish has a destiny component to that,
Yeah.
and then the second book is
Sword
flat
of
out
Destiny.
called Sword
Yeah.
of Destiny,
Yeah.
and those are themes that I really like and that I explore in my books too. The themes of destiny and prophecy, and I feel that for the last 20 years, right, there's been this movement in fantasy about prophecy sucks, and let's the will of man and the heroes and whatever is the most important thing, and let's subvert and fight against prophecy and defeat prophecy, or
Sure.
not care about prophecy, right? And that's legitimate, right? Subversion is nice, but once everyone is doing it, it's not subversion anymore, is it? And it gets boring.
Yeah. Now
And the
it's just
thing
another trope.
exactly, it's just another trope. So the thing that I actually like about the Witcher books is that there's weight to prophecy and to destiny. It's you can it's like sailing a boat. You can't escape the wind. You
Hmm.
can maybe sort of use it to put the
Help
boat
you along your
to
way.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, to try. You can steer it, right, but you
Hmm.
can't avoid it. And
Right.
I really like the way the books in general, the Witcher books in general, treat that. And I think, I mean, Again, I don't want to spoil it for you because you're still in Blood of the Elves, but I think that that's the main theme of Ciri's journey in particular, which is like she is, she is she has destiny all over her, right?
Right.
She was destined for Geralt before she was born. She was destined for her blood, the blood of the elves
Hmm.
gives her a certain destiny, right? A certain part to play in the future of the world.
Right.
And like any young person, she rebels against it. And at the end of the day, the way the books deal with that is much more interesting than fantasy usually deals with it. So yeah, I think that's very enjoyable. And again, you don't have the full context for this, but I think that you have some context about how the universe deals with prophecy and fate from the short stories, and now
Yeah.
the first book, the
Yeah,
first
because like
slash third.
we see I think it's what was so powerful about yeah, it's the second book where Sword of Destiny, where Geralt kind of abandons Ciri, and he's like, you're gonna go this way, I'm gonna go this way, and he rides off in the dead of night, and she even like chases after him, like, wait, come back, and he's like, I have to go. So he goes off and does his own thing for a while, but then he gets hurt and picked up by this farmer guy. He gets involved with him somehow, and the farmer brings him back to their farmstead. Or no, this is when he enacts the law of surprise
Yeah,
for the second time, which is a question that I definitely have in a minute here. But he enacts the law of surprise while he's on the road. And he protects this guy from the monsters, and then he comes back with him to his homestead, and when he gets there, the guy tells him, we don't have any children on the way. Like, my wife is barren. Like, we're unable to have any more children. So you won't be finding a child at home if that's what you're expecting. Um, and he comes back and his wife says, like, oh, there's this girl that's just joined our family. She's
yeah,
like an orphan or whatever. And she's off playing with the other kids, and then when they come up to the house, Geralt sees her and she's like, Geralt, and they like run to each other. And it was the best ending to the book. I
yeah.
loved it so much. And it's like, okay, so there's no escaping this.
No,
Which
no,
is
and
really
I
cool.
I like that, right? Again, after being beat over the head for the past 20 years with the whole rebel against destiny, trope, it feels nice, right?
Yeah.
It feels nice.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's been really cool to see that play out. The question that I have is, why does Geralt invoke the law of surprise in the first place? First with Dooney and what's her name,
Yeah,
but then later with this farmer, it's like, why doesn't he just say, just pay me like 200, gold coins or whatever? Like, why is he like, I invoke the law of
yeah.
surprise? Why is that a thing?
Well, that's the other thing that I like so much about the Witcher books and Sapkowski's writing in general. And this is something that I fight a little bit with fellow authors all the time, which is that intuition that we need to have everything explained and make sense, right,
Mm,
for the readers. And it's like a puzzle. Everything at the end, once the reader has all the bits and pieces, they should be able to assemble it and connect it, and it all makes sense.
right.
And my view is that people really aren't like that. People are
Mm,
complicated and inconsistent and weird in all sorts in all sorts of ways, right?
mm,
And that's where I really like the characters in Sapkowski's works,
mm,
because they feel real, because of that they have their own, they're willful, and they have their own, set of internal rules. And like all of us at times, sometimes they are internally inconsistent. They change their minds. I mean, the Geralt is a character that's constantly struggling with himself. For he wants, he's a good person at heart. He's an heroic person at heart, but he hates it. He thinks
Yeah.
he's an idiot for being for having those impulses to help people, right?
Right.
And that's part I think, and this is my interpretation, because again, you never really know what he's thinking. He never
Hmm.
really tells you, right? He has conversations with other characters, and you can get a sense of where he's coming from the other characters, but you're not you're in his mind at times, but never for the important stuff, right? If he
Right.
feels angry or sad or whatever, but you
Yeah.
don't really get to hear his internal thought process fully. And it just feels like that's a game he plays with itself, right? With the whole law of surprise thing. He's just being like, okay, let's play a game with myself. Let's play a game with fate. Let's see, what fate brings up to me. Let's see what the world brings up to me.
Okay.
Because he really doesn't want to, he feels like the world isn't right, that this thing isn't working as it's supposed to, and he feels like an idiot for having those heroic, those honorable impulses.
Right.
That's where I feel is coming from.
I guess I just wasn't sure if the Law of Surprise was a Witcher thing because they try to bring,
Hmm.
they try to go out and find young boys to bring back to Kaer and to create more Witchers. And so
Yeah.
I didn't know if his whole purpose in the Law of Surprise was to find a child to bring back to Kaer Morhen, or if it was
Yeah.
just like some other like random reason.
Well, I mean, there's definitely that, right? But if you think about it, they're not really keen on recruiting, right? Are they? They're a dying order, and they're a dying order because they don't really care about maintaining their order, right?
Yeah.
They just do their own stuff. And again, it ties a lot with that kind of, you know Eastern European, right? Sorry, sort of cultural, right, situation,
Yeah.
right? There's a, like in many Eastern European works of art, there's this sort of cynicism that permeates the world. And I think that the Witcher world is kind of, I mean, for example, you talked about the politics part lately.
Yeah.
Whenever I read a politics driven scene in a Witcher book, I feel that Sapkowski is kind of trying to do a parody, because there these people plot and plot and plot some more, and then at the end of the day, they're constantly vexed by
Yeah.
just the reality of they're incredibly powerful people, right? These are sorcerers and sorceresses that can level whole kingdoms, right, with the gesture. And at the end of the day, things really don't, their complex plots never really come from fruition. They're usually
Right.
frustrated, by a dude with the sword, and by a little girl with magical powers she can barely control. So I
Right.
kind of feel that there's a bit of cynicism, right, slash parody, right there on those
Yeah.
segments.
That's great. I love that. I want to talk about some specific moments from the books before we go on to talk about, and we could talk about the game too, but before we
Yeah.
go on to talk about like the show, I loved like the mermaid story from Sword of Destiny. Do you remember this one?
I don't
Where,
remember it too well. I kind of remember that it was one of the more thoughtful ones. It kind of made Geralt, again. It was one of those stories where it feels like it makes Geralt and ourselves, right,
yeah.
by consequence, wonder really, what is this thing about killing monsters, right? Is would it not, shouldn't we at least make an effort to try to coexist with some of these beings,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. It was it was
Yeah.
probably my like favorite story
Hmm.
in
Why
Sword of
was that?
Destiny. Because first of all, the first scene is very funny because you have this baron or duke or something, and he's trying to romance this mermaid, and he's telling Geralt, they're standing out on this boat, and he's telling Geralt like, I love her, like I want to be with her, but she wants me to uh, grow fins, and I want her to, get legs and come to the shore. And so Geralt is like singing to her because it's how you talk to the merfolk.
Yeah.
And Geralt's there on the boat, and he's singing to this mermaid like, he loves you, but he does not want a tail. And the way the guy in the audiobook did it is so funny. Like all of the little inflections and all of the little, like, you can just tell that Geralt is like,
Yeah.
why am I doing this right now? Like the things I do for money, oh my God. And so he's asking this mermaid, he's like, I know. He's like, you have a sorceress down there who can give you legs, and he wants you to, get your legs and then come to the human world and live with him. And she's like, no, the only way that I will marry him is if he goes to his sorceress and gets a tail and comes down here. And so they're going back and forth like the mermaid and this like duke both like love each other, but they're not willing to give up their way of life for the other person.
Yeah.
And the story itself is all about sacrifice. And in order to be in a relationship with somebody, there is some amount of sacrifice that you have to give up in order to make life doable with that person. Because as people, we're all very different from each other, no matter how many things we may have in common, no matter how much like mutual ground we may share, there's always going to be the thing that you have to give up for this other person. And then comes in Essie into the story, who is this bard, much like Dandelion.
Hmm.
She's very skilled, like Dandelion is. And she starts this kind of slow burn romance with Geralt. And I really, really liked this. I think it was done significantly better than the romance with Yennefer.
Yeah.
And I was like, obviously, I know that Geralt ends up with Yennefer, but I was rooting for him and Essie because I'm like, I just love this relationship so much. Um, and Geralt kind of gets to this point where he realizes that he is not willing to sacrifice, or that he can't give Essie what she wants, which is like real genuine affection. And he's like, I don't really have that to give. Um, he's like, I could fake it, but then that would be the sacrifice of like my pride and my ego and like my self-respect in order to give
Yeah.
this woman these feelings that I kind of already don't have in the first place. And so
Yeah.
that's when the story really goes into talking about the sacrifice you have to make for others. And then we get to the very end where Geralt's trying to eradicate the waters of these um, sea-dwelling people that are killing sailors. And so he goes to do that, and this is what you were talking about, where he goes down into the water and he realizes that these are intelligent life forms that just want the Duke to stay out of the waters. They just don't want him to take his ships through there because that's their land. And so Geralt goes back to the Duke and he's like, hey, so like they're an intelligent people, which means that I'm not going to kill them. And they just do not want you going out there and like taking their pearls and stuff because that's their
Hmm.
land. If you continue to do so, then they are going to like wipe you guys out. Like he's like, I almost died. You guys are going to die if you go out there. And the Duke doesn't really believe him, or like maybe he does, but he's like not willing to
Yeah.
like sacrifice that part of that for these people. And so then at the very, very end, like one of the last couple scenes, is the mermaid walking into the room on her two legs. And Dandelion is like, she gave up her voice to like have legs and walk in here. And then she talks, she's like, no, I didn't give up my voice, idiot. Like, she's like, she's like, my sorceress was able to do this. And so she comes in and she like declares her love for this man, and they have this moment. It's just like, oh wow, like that actually like worked out. Like she gave up this, she gave up her way of life to now be on land with this duke, and marry him. And I was like, that's just such a great theme, such a great message. And then you have, Essie and Geralt spending a few more nights together on the road,
Hmm.
and then they go their separate ways. And then you find out later that Essie, a couple years later, has died of the plague, and that
Yeah.
they had like this big pile of bodies, and she was in the pile. And Dandelion had constructed this song from their time together with Geralt, Essie, and Dandelion. And it was like this very romantic song about these two that walked into the sunset together. And it was this whirlwind romance. And, he was basically saying, he's like, I could have written a song that told the whole thing more truthfully, but people don't want to hear that song. They want to hear about these two lovers coming together
Exactly.
and walking into the sunset together.
Exactly.
Um, he's like,
That's part of
however,
Dandelion shtick, as well.
yeah,
That he's
exactly.
the autorial voice, right?
Right,
That.
yeah. And he's like, however, he's like, I will never sing this song. Like this song is just for me to
Mhm.
remember our time with Geralt and Essie together. He's like, I've never performed it. I've never sung it to anybody. It's just for me. And he goes into, I think it was Novigrad or something,
Mhm.
where she had died. And so he goes up to this big pile of bodies and he pulls her out of it, and he carries her out of Novigrad in his arms, and he goes and buries her underneath a tree with her pearl amulet. Like Geralt had told her, like what he gave her the shell, and the pearl came out, and he told her, he's like, take that pearl and place it in a silver amulet with a flower petal around it. And so she did, and so Dandelion buried her with her amulet and with her lute. And I was just like, God damn, that was like that was my favorite
Yeah.
story in the whole book. It was so good. I loved it.
Yeah,
I would
it packs a lot for a short story, right?
Yeah, there's a lot in there. It was definitely one of the longer ones in the
Yeah. Was
book.
that remind me? Was that the Catriona plague? Do you remember?
Uh I do not
Yeah,
remember the specific plague.
got it. If it was the Catriona plague, then there's an extra layer of tragedy there that you'll figure it out as you keep reading the books,
Okay,
right?
interesting, interesting.
Yeah.
Um
Uh,
yeah, just such
no,
such a
but
good story. It
it's very
completely just
good.
took me away. Yeah.
Right, and in the way that that's something that he does specifically with the short stories, is that it picks elements, right, of
Hmm.
in that case it's picking elements of the the Little Mermaid story, right? And
Yeah.
he does that a lot, right? Danny and Pavetta, which is one of my favorite stories, right?
Hmm.
He picks, right, themes of the the Beauty and the Beast, but he
Yes.
always twists, right, those fairy tales, right.
Yeah. And
It twists them in ways that are new and surprising and interesting, but still somewhat true to the original tale, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think that's something I noticed about the books, because I had first noticed it in the games, like while playing Witcher
Mhm.
3 and the DLCs, especially the DLCs. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, there's all these little references to all of these fables from all across mythology, and that's so cool. And then when I got into the books, I'm like, oh, that's because Sapkowski's doing the same thing here. And so I thought
Yeah.
that was another way
Have
that the
have
games
you
were.
read Moorcock, by the way?
I
Just
have not, no.
another sidebar. Okay, so there is also. I mean, Sapkowski has never recognized this. This is something that people, fans of the Witcher books and Moorcock, talk about,
Yeah.
but he's never recognized this. But it feels like there are also, Michael Moorcock influences in his stories, right? Specifically when again in the themes of prophecy, destiny, and in the character of Geralt himself, people see people find a lot of similarities and parallels with Moorcock's Elric of Melniboné, right? So
Oh,
that's
yeah,
that's
the
definitely an
Elric.
interesting,
Okay.
yeah. So that's definitely a nice sidebar to explore once you're done with these.
Okay, yeah, I'll definitely check that out. I've heard a lot of people talk about Elric.
Yeah.
Um, Also, what have you seen the news that there is a new Witcher book out that is like a young Geralt that Sapkowski
No.
just put out? Yeah, apparently it's only in Polish right now. It hasn't been translated. Um,
Mm,
but a quick Google search will probably bring it up. Um, because I forget what it is in English, but it is him
yeah.
after after just recently becoming a Witcher and
Interesting.
um his like new
I
yeah.
haven't read Season of Storms yet. Is it
Oh,
Season of? I
okay.
think. Yeah. So there's a book, but that came out years ago, which is Seasons of Storms, which is a Witcher tale, right? Again, before.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to. Maybe I've missed it.
No, this came out in like November or
Oh, okay.
December.
So yeah,
The
good on him, right? That his franchise, after many years, right? Sapkowski is not a young dude.
yeah.
These books existed for many years, and he never got a lot out of them. So good on him.
Yeah.
You gotta get those franchise royalties.
Yeah.
Make money from giving good stories to people. I can
Yeah,
definitely
I'm
get
I'm
in on that.
glad I'm glad that there's new stuff coming out.
Yeah,
I was really excited to see that. I just hope it gets translated to English soon. It says the title of the new Witcher book is Razdrose Kruko. It can be translated from Polish as Raven's Crossing or Crossroads of Ravens.
nice,
And it takes place decades before the main novel saga focuses on a teenage Geralt of Rivia.
interesting,
It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I'm excited to
interesting.
read it when it finally comes to English. I don't know how long it takes those kind of things to get translated. Maybe like I don't know if it's like months or if it's like a year or what. Um, but I'm certainly interested.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to read it as well. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So I know you wanted to talk a little bit the show. I actually don't know if you have a hard stop or not. I'm still good,
Okay.
but I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the show. But I really don't have a lot to say about the
Yeah,
show
I
because I only saw a couple of episodes.
okay.
My wife
Yeah,
watched it, and so every now and then I looked over her shoulder to see what was happening.
sure.
Again, thing with the attention span, I just can't. Television just can't keep my my attention. I do
Yeah.
want to say that as someone that's close to the books,
Hmm.
I have to eat a bit of crow because I thought that Henry Cavill was a terrible choice for Geralt because
What?
Geralt isn't supposed to be pretty. Geralt is supposed to be kind of
Sure.
weird
Yeah.
looking, kind of alienish. Is an
Yeah.
albino. He's not supposed to look good. He has a lot
Right.
of charisma, that's why he keep getting women interested in him. But he's not supposed to be a pretty guy, and Cavill is nothing if not a pretty guy.
Sure.
But I have to say, I need to eat some crow because he did such a spectacular job. I
Oh
really
my
think that
gosh.
I really feel that while he wasn't a good physical casting, it's a case where he was such into it that it
Yeah.
didn't matter that it wasn't a good physical casting because he
Well,
really
so
he really did justice to the character.
that's the thing about the show is, I'm sure that the diehard Witcher fans can probably pick apart like a bunch of like lore that was not done correctly or whatever. But I saw the first two seasons, and then when it was announced that Henry Cavill was leaving, I was like, yeah, I'm not interested anymore. So I didn't watch
Yeah.
season 3 or 4. Um, but I did watch the first two seasons, and they are remarkably close to The Last Wish and The Sword of Destiny. All of those stories are there, except for I think, except for the mermaid story,
Hmm.
and maybe the doppelganger story. All of the stuff with like Yennefer and Ciri and all of that is there in the show, and it's done really, really well, like very true to the books. And so I can only imagine that in season three, they must have done like a big departure for Henry to be like, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore. Um, so which is why I'm not super interested in watching season
Hmm.
three. But the first two seasons, at the time, I was just a fan of the games. I hadn't read the books or anything yet.
Hmm.
And so it just like hit all of the marks for me. And I think the thing that's probably more interesting to talk about is, like you mentioned, Henry, he cares so much about it. I didn't really know that people would be upset with the physical casting. But as far as like the way that he embodied the character and the
Yeah.
way that he cared about the source material, I think about it like this. We get shows like Rings of Power and The Wheel of Time, neither of which care about the source material in the slightest. Like both all the showrunners of both those shows have said we want to do our own thing. And it's such a like massive slap in the face to the fans. It's a massive slap in the face to uh, the original author, thinking that you can write their story better than they could. Like it,
Hmm.
it just kind of like blows my mind. And as fantasy fans, we have not had anyone who will stand up for us and say, no, we're going to do this the proper way. And then in
Yeah.
comes Henry Cavill, who's like, they start to depart from the source material. Again, I don't know enough to know how they did that, but they departed enough from the source material that Henry was like, no, this story deserves more respect. It deserves our time and attention to detail and, doing it the correct way. And this big name actor was so passionate about it that he was willing to put his entire career on the line in order to make a point and say, no, you guys aren't going to do this. And I'm just like, I was thinking about this the other day. I'm like, dude, he could have just gone in and collected a paycheck, put
Yeah.
his Geralt wig on, and slayed some monsters and made out with Yennefer, and that would have been that, and he would have gotten a big paycheck. But he took a like probably a big blow to his career from doing that. Like there's people that won't hire him for
Yeah. For
things
sure.
now because he stood up to these showrunners.
For sure. I mean,
But
we're
it
still talking about a millionaire here, so
sure,
there's levels of. But yeah, I understand what you
there's
say.
levels of it,
Massive
but I
respect.
mean think about how many
Massive
other
respect.
opportunities, yeah, how
Yeah.
many other opportunities that
Correct.
he's given up by doing that. And so
Yeah.
I think the point is that he's made a point. He has made there is hopefully a shift coming in the industry to make things more true to the source material. And we've seen that with shows like Dark Matter and
Mm.
Silo. And there's one
Yeah.
that's escaping my mind that I
I'm
was just talking
I'm
about the other
I'm
day where
curious
I'm
about
like,
the new Peter Jackson movie, right? Because Peter Jackson was the
mm,
original. Let's do this right. Let's do. I mean, I know that
yeah,
some people quibble about how he did the Arwen and how he inserted Arwen there and etc. But by and large, that was the I felt as a Lord of the Rings fan, right? That was a really cool adaptation. So
yeah,
he was kind of, and then people just be, began deviating from that
yeah.
for some reason, and I still don't understand why. But
Yeah. Like Peter Jackson kind of set the precedent, right? He was
yeah,
like, I want to do this as close as we can. He
yeah,
didn't get it all right, but he got as
no,
close as he possibly
I totally
could.
understand. I mean, again, people quibble about Arwen, but I understand that. Okay, so do you want to put, people again, always struggling with people's attention spans, hiring
Yeah,
actors, making sure, when you they wanted to introduce a character like Arwen earlier on so that people would feel like the romance had more weight if they
right.
had just put Glorfidel in there, right? Glorfidel in there.
Mhm.
Which is a character that just appears and then disappears from the books, right? It just makes it's just more clean to put Arwen in there. So again, I understand that sometimes you need to do that because it's a different medium. There's different sets of rules. There's different expectations from the audience. Sometimes books are a bit too complex and you need to clean them up, right? So
Yeah,
I understand that. But that's not what happened with, let's say, the Wheel of Time, right? The Wheel of Time is, as far as I'm concerned, is a bit of a disaster. I don't know what's your opinion on that,
I
and
hate
and,
it.
uh,
I hate it.
and it was bad enough that I didn't even, again, that's why I didn't watch The Witcher. My wife watched it, and I occasionally see an episode, but I didn't even give it a chance just because I've just quit basically movie and TV adaptations.
Yeah. I would give the first two seasons a chance.
Hmm.
After reading these books, I'm like, it's remarkably close.
Okay,
I'm
interesting.
sure there's like extra stuff that they threw in. I'm sure that there's little storylines that either aren't in the books or are there in a different way. But the Dunian Parvetta story is
Hmm.
done really well. The whole
Great.
Ciri thing is done really, really well. The even the Goat Man story from the first book, that's in there. That's a really
Hmm.
funny episode. The genie story with Yennefer is done really
Yes.
well.
That's
And
still one of my favorite stories, by the way. I know you don't like Yennefer, but I really like that.
yeah.
I really like that story. I understand, by the way, that Yennefer is a stormy woman, but I am into stormy women.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have just never liked her. Even from the first time I played the game, which was my first introduction to the character, I was like, clearly, like, this is nobody's favorite. Like, we're not supposed to like Yennefer, right? And then I was surprised when people are like, no, you're supposed to like Yennefer. It's like, really?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I've never enjoyed the character. I think she's a well-written character. I just don't enjoy her as like a person.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry. I just think that Triss is just kind of milk toast,
Oh
right?
man,
That's just what
I
I
think
feel.
she's so like sweet and nice, and she actually like cares about Geralt, like she like genuinely loves him, whereas Yennefer is
Yeah.
like playing with him all the time. Like it pissed me off so much in book 2 when that was another story. Do I have it in here somewhere
Hmm.
where they go to this town to visit this wizard and how do I not have it in here? They go to this town with to visit this wizard, and it turns out that while Geralt has either been at the cabin or whatever, or while he's been out looking for work or whatever, Yennefer has been going and banging this other wizard guy in the mornings.
Yeah.
And Geralt's like, "What the fuck? Like, what are we doing?" And she's like,
Yeah,
"Well,
but
I
it's not
can't.
like Geralt
I
isn't right. Geralt isn't
well,
really the model
at the time,
of
when
fidelity.
they were together, he was being faithful to Yennefer, and so
Yeah,
he's like, "Well, are we a thing or aren't we?" She's like, "I don't know. I can't decide between the two of you." And he's like, "Okay, well, you need to make a decision." And then she just
yeah.
runs off, and I was like, I hate her so much. Like I do
I
not like her.
understand that impulse, but again, that's why I really I'm going back to the, going back to what I previously stated. That's exactly why I like these books so much
Yeah,
more than so many other books out there, because these people. It's exactly because of those weird quirks that they feel real,
yeah,
right?
sure,
That's so good about them. People these days, characters are just too clean. They're just too
yeah.
tropey. They're just too, oh, this guy is this, so this guy is this, and this lady is that, and this is this, and they don't surprise you. They
Right.
don't make senseless, stupid decisions. And if I know something about people, is that people make senseless, stupid decisions all the time,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I think, like I said, it's written well. I don't think it's anything on the side of the author where I'm like,
Yeah,
this is written badly or anything. It's a well written character and well thought out character.
yeah.
I just hate her. I just cannot stand her.
That's fair enough. What's your position on Kira Metz? I kind of like Kira Metz.
So I've met Kira in the game. I have not met her in the books yet.
Ah, okay,
So I'm excited
got
to
it.
get to her in the books. I know that in the game, she's into some really shady magic, some
Yeah,
really like dark magic that kind of like, if I remember correctly, it's like messing with this whole town that she's trying to do research on, but that research is at the cost of
yeah.
I can't remember. I think it's enslaving souls basically. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a topic, right? That's a full topic with the sorceresses, right?
yeah,
In the full series, that they're very callous, that they're very powerful, they're
yeah,
very kind of, okay, we're doing bad stuff, but it's for the greater good, right? That's their whole
right.
shtick. Because why? Because we know better, because we're smarter and more conscious than anyone else. And again, it's a bit of it's Sapkowski doing a bit of a parody, right, of our leaders and elites and institutions, which
Yeah.
is, no, we understand that this isn't that people are going to be hurt, but it's for the greater good, and that just drives Geralt nuts, right?
Yeah.
And again, as I think it drives most people nuts. So again, I think that there's another opportunity for to listen. The best fantasy holds a mirror right up to reality. That's not to say it's preachy. I hate preachy books, but it holds a
Yeah.
mirror up to reality, and I think that the Witcher books do that very, very well.
Yeah. For sure. For sure.
Yeah,
Um, there's so you mentioned the fourth game and how people were kind of like, well, how is Ciri a Witcher now and stuff.
yeah.
There's a quote from Sword of Destiny that I actually think could solve this, but I don't think CD Projekt is going this way. Um, Somebody asked Geralt, "You believe a child of destiny would survive the trials?" And he says, "We believe a child of destiny would not require them." And so
Hmm.
I'm curious why. I don't know why CD Projekt doesn't go this route to kind of explain how Ciri is a Witcher. Like,
Yeah,
if she's a true child of destiny, basically what Geralt is saying here is if she's a child of destiny, she should be able to take the concoctions and all of the things without having to go through the trials. Um, so I don't know. Is this looked into
yeah.
more later in the books?
No, no, no. It's not. In fact, the talk of Ciri ever being a Witcher goes away very, very, very fast. And in fact, again, the Ciri's whole arc, right, is a bit of a Peter Pan arc, growing up arc, where she's constantly engaged in she's learning about the world, and she's in that phase where whatever is new is what she wants to be, right? So she's brought
Yeah,
up by Witcher, so she wants to be a Witcher. But
yeah,
then she lives with Yennefer for a bit, so she wants to be a sorceress. Then she spends some time with the troops, so she wants to be an artist, right? And it
yeah,
goes and goes, and it's very normal, right? It's very, very normal for a little girl or a little boy, right, to
yeah,
feel like that. It's exploration, right?
yeah.
It's an exploratory phase, and the
Sure.
book does that quite well. I
It
actually,
does it
you
so
hate
well.
Yennefer. I am not in love with Ciri. Up to the end, right up to the final book, where I
Yeah.
warm up. Only in the final book I warm up a little bit to Ciri,
Oh,
but
really?
still, only on the fire, only on Lady of the Lake. But still, I just think that she's kind of annoying, right? I
That's
just
so
think that
funny.
Ciri is kind
I
of
I
annoying.
I
I
thought
don't
I
have a lot
thought
of patience for children, so
sure.
I mean, I have patience for my own kid. I think
Right, yeah, when
that's a
it's your
blood
own
thing,
kid. Yeah,
right? But I don't.
for
But
sure.
it just feels like, okay. So let me but I don't like the brat,
Sure.
personality type, and Ciri is very bratty. I feel like
Yeah.
Ciri is very bratty, right? So I don't really like that about her. I don't really like her as a character. And in fact, the hardest thing for me in the series is how much it is about Siri, versus everyone else. I was like, I enjoy the Siri parts are well written. I just don't really enjoy the character so
But
much.
what about the crossover between Geralt and Ciri, like the dad
Yeah,
stuff, like
yeah,
that
that
that's
stuff is
what
cool.
gets
I
me.
like, I like that stuff, but and again, again, I don't want to spoil it too much, but you probably
Sure.
know this, right? The books parallel the game in that there's not a lot of time for that stuff. The books are a tale of a family split by war, in essence.
Hmm.
That's a way to put it, right?
Sure.
They are a family, imperfect as it is, Geralt, Yennefer, and Ciri,
Yeah.
and the war with the war with Emperor Emir, right? The war with Nilfgaard splits
Yeah.
them up, right?
Yeah.
And most of the books are spent with them trying to frantically reunite again. That's a
Right.
very Eastern European. If you read some Eastern European literature, you understand that's a very
For
Eastern
sure.
European story.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely.
Right. So and it's very, from that, again, that's a different perspective that you can look at the books as the story of a war. It happens in a fantasy world, but it's the story, right, of a family trying separated by war trying to reunite. It's another
Right.
way of so there's not a lot of bad moments in there, aside again from that first book, and then the last one.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know.
Yeah.
There was speaking of Blood of Elves, there was some good Siri moments that I really liked.
Yeah.
And I'll kind of go through these and then we can start to wrap up here.
Sure.
Um, I love the early scenes with Ciri and Triss when Triss like she meets her on the trail and she like starts examining her and she's shocked that she's got all these like bruises and everything and Ciri's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, it's just from the pendulum or whatever."
The Witcher
And
3.
Triss is like, "What do you mean?" And
Verified.
yeah, and she's like shocked at like the living conditions. She's living in like this broken down castle. And then she goes downstairs and lays into the guys. And she's like, "Did you even think about what was gonna happen when she got her period? Like, did you have any idea? Like, it probably happened while she was alone in her room one night, and it probably terrified her." And
Yeah, and
that
they're
part
like,
just
"Oh,
like
we're idiots." They're
yeah,
like-
that part just like broke my heart. I have two sisters that I grew up with, and so I'm just like, oh, I can't imagine how difficult that would have been, without my mom around, able to help my sisters and stuff. So I'm like, God, that had to be terrible, terrible for Siri. And then I love that she's also gonna learn like book knowledge and like politics and like all of these other topics. And Siri comes down and she says something to the effect of like it's all very rehearsed, like Triss had to rehearse it,
yeah,
and Siri's like. Uh, She's like, "Hello, fellow Witchers. I cannot partake in exercise today because I am otherwise indisposed." and
yeah. I remember
and
that.
and Vesemir is like, "Of course, we totally understand. Take as much time as you need." And she like goes off to do her own thing. And then Vesemir turns to the other Witchers and she's like, "If she ever comes downstairs in the morning wearing a dress, no exercises that day." I'm just like, that whole scene was pure gold for me. I
Yeah,
absolutely loved it. And then before that scene, Triss is like taking Ciri up to her room, and along the way she's passing all of the other Witchers' rooms, and they have like the skin of a bear, like a big bear pelt on their wall, or like a wolf or something like that. All these beasts that they've killed while out in the woods and hunting. And then she gets to Ciri's room and she has the skin of a giant rat on her
Yeah.
wall. And I just could so vividly picture the day, Ciri had been seeing all the boys with their like big like wolf pelts and stuff on the wall, and she like admired them so much. And on her first day, she was probably down in like the cellar or something, and she managed to kill a big rat. And I can just picture her like dragging this rat up by its tail, up to like the main room where all the witchers are, and being
Yeah.
like, "Look what I killed!" and all of them just like cheering her and helping her skin this
Amazing.
big rat so she could put it on her wall.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can picture
Yeah.
it so well.
By the way,
Uh,
that's something that actually props to the video games. Again, there's a break, right? There's a break between the end of the books and the beginning of the games.
right,
That
yeah,
that 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 you know you can't make sense of it. You just need to use video game magic logic, and
sure,
accept that the games are kind of elaborate fan fiction,
sure,
because
sure,
otherwise it doesn't make sense.
yeah,
But that said, one thing that the games do so well is to give the other Witchers their due. Lambert and Vesemir,
yeah,
they're treated very very well. They get the screen time they deserve and the endings
right.
they deserve, I feel.
Yeah, I love Lambert. I've only seen him in the third game,
Mhm.
but there's that period of time where Geralt returns to Kaer Morhen, and I
Yeah.
think it's when Ciri is trapped in the body of that thing or whatever.
Mhm.
And you get to talk to all of the other Witchers, and you get to have like these big conversations with them, and they reminisce on old times. And I'm like, I love this. Like I was going through every single dialogue option because I'm like, I just want more of this.
Yeah.
And so yeah, they're all fantastic. And I loved in Blood of Elves at the beginning when you get some more time with them and you get to hear, Lambert like training with Ciri and the other Witchers. I'm forgetting all the names, but they get a little bit more screen time at the beginning of Blood of Elves. So after the whole like period thing, um, Geralt goes up to Ciri and he tells her because Ciri asks Triss, she's like,
Mhm.
"Will you stay with us and like help us learn how to do this stuff?" And Triss even like brings that up to Vesemir, and Vesemir is like, "Dear God, yes, please stay. Like,
Yeah.
please stay and help us with this little girl. We don't know what to do." And I love the line that was like, she was talking to all of them, but she was talking to Geralt, and she's like, "You've had her like exercising in these harsh conditions." He's like, "We're at a Witcher school. We didn't know what else to do with her. We've
Exactly.
we've only had boys here. Like we don't know what to do with a girl. We just trained her like a Witcher because that's what we've always done." And so I love
Yeah.
that line. But I love when, Triss asks, she's like, she wants me to stay and help, and Vesemir's like, "Dear God, yes, please stay." And Geralt turns to Ciri and he tells her how proud of her he is for her like reaching out and asking Triss to stay and like making all of this happen. And it was just like one of those moments where I'm like, that just like touches my heart. I love all the Geralt and Ciri scenes. The only one that was like
Yeah.
mildly annoying for me was the first time he met Ciri, and she's on the
Hmm.
road. She's like, "I'm a princess. I don't have to listen to you." And he's got her like
Yeah.
slung over his shoulder. He's like, "You're gonna go wherever I tell you to go." Um, and then yeah, then the last note that I have for
Mhm.
Blood of Elves, kind of where I stopped, was my note is just LOL Yennefer's letter, where she writes it to Geralt,
Dear
and
friend.
yeah, your dear friend. She's like, "Of course I will be there at once, my dear friend. I'm so glad that you contacted me first to deal with this problem, my dear friend." And it was just like, oh my God. It was so funny. Because it
Yes.
doesn't tell you. it doesn't initially tell you who's sending the letter until Yennefer like signs off her name at the end. But like a couple sentences into it, I was like, "Oh, this is Yennefer, isn't it?"
Yeah.
Um, so that was
Yeah,
great.
the letter Yennefer's letters are great. So, it-
Uh,
again, she is a very stormy person. She
yeah,
comes off as but again, that's part of the charm of their relationship, is that the only reason she's that spiteful is really out of jealousy, right?
yeah,
For for Triss.
yeah.
And again, Triss is another one of those characters, by the way, that really gets more proper exposure, right, in the games
Oh, okay.
versus the books. In the books, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but
Oh no.
she kind of fades away. She's always there, right? You see
Yeah,
Triss in the last book, but she stays in the sidelines, right? She's not,
yeah.
she's not a main POV character or anything.
Right. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's too bad, but okay, so as we go into
But I think
our
I think you'll like Yennefer more as the books progress as well.
I hope so. I hope it sells me on Yennefer. I'm trying to have an open mind because
Yeah.
people have told me they're like, "No, Yennefer is like the real deal." And I'm just like
Just like
so far I'm
Geralt
like
as his dad,
I just
right?
hate this character.
Yeah. But they both get that. So Geralt has the father arc, and Yennefer gets her mother. Yennefer
Sure.
gets the motherhood arc. So it's nice. I do think that it's. I mean, again, I don't want to go into too much detail because of spoilers, and also because it's a bit of a one-sided conversation. Because
Sure.
but just the books, right? The hardest one is Tower of the Swallow. I feel, right.
Really.
Tower of the Swallow is very slow paced and very meandering, right? So it's a bit of a tough. Yeah, it's worth though, for the payoff then, on Lady of the Lake, but one of but you really do get to see, how far Yennefer goes, right, for Ciri, and it kind of tugs at your heart a little bit, I think.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm looking forward to it.
Right.
Well, as we wrap up here and kind of go into our final thoughts, I was curious, what do you think of the translation? Because people have said, and I think
Yeah.
maybe this is why, because I think I don't know, I probably knew that it was translated, but I don't think I was prepared for just like 'cause you've mentioned the prose a couple times,
Yeah.
and I don't think the prose is something I really think about when I think of the Witcher books, at least so far, because I think when I first tried Blood of Elves, I was kind
Mm.
of put off by the way that it was written. I was like, this doesn't sound like a sentence that most people would say.
Yeah, and
And
you're
so
doing audiobook, right? So that's probably also
yeah, that's
different.
probably also different. Yeah. And so I was wondering, I was like, I was wondering if it was a translation thing for me, maybe. I'm like, maybe it's just the translation that's made it weird to me. But did you have any issues with the translation while you were reading them?
No, I mean, yes and no, right? I can
Sure,
feel, just because I also have some practice in translation, because I speak and write in two different languages. I can see, right,
sure,
the translation. I can detect that it's a translation. But I don't know a word of Polish, so I've never read the
sure.
originals. I have no idea how they would compare.
Right.
But I can detect that there's a translation there. I have to think that the translation needs to be faithful, because there are things there that feel very self-indulgent, right?
Hmm.
For example, when they're when the sorcerers convene, right? The
Yeah,
sorceresses, and it just goes into so much detail, right? To me, I am a Hemingway kind of guy. I like to write, I like to write minimalist, prose. and I just roll my eyes, while Sapkowski describes, what each sorceress is wearing, their jewelry, the way they've made up their hair, etc. And I'm just like, please stop already, right? And
Oh.
I think that for that to survive the translation, right, it has to be pretty faithful, right?
Mm,
It has to be a pretty faithful translation. I don't think that there's a problem with translation. If the translation was going to cut corners, it would cut it there, right? It
mm.
wouldn't go into this,
That's fair.
smorgasbord of description.
Mm,
And then there's the dialogue, which I think is, when I say that I like the prose, I really like the prose, the descriptive prose in terms of the scenery, but especially the battles, the action scenes,
yes.
the character moments. But the dialogue really takes the prize for me. I think that the way they speak, right, the way the characters converse, it's like, it's always Bartok. I mean, I always feel, I when I'm when I read Geralt talk with one of his friends, I feel like the setting, maybe it's a battle or in a castle or something, but I'm always reminded of the kind of conversations that I used to have, at 2 a.m. having some drinks with my friends, right?
Sure. Yeah.
That's what I feel.
Yeah, for sure. I do like the dialogue. I think that's where I notice the most of
Hmm.
the translation kind of stuff coming in, because I think
Yeah.
it's the dialogue where I'm like, this doesn't like sound like a sentence that somebody would usually say, but I enjoy it. I like the discussions between
Yeah.
these people and stuff. I also think that the book could use a new audiobook, because I think the audiobooks are
Mm.
very old. And even the recording of them, it sounds like an old microphone, an old like recording software or whatever. You can kind of hear a faint like hiss in the background during the audiobook. And so I think it could very much use a refresh, and I would love to see Nick Podell do these books, because he's done the King Killer Chronicles, he does King's Dark
Mm.
Tidings, he does a million other books that I've listened to and loved, and I would love to see his take on The Witcher. I think he could do it really, really well. But I think regardless,
Yeah.
it could probably
Well,
use a
well,
refresh on the audiobooks.
part of the awkwardness, right, of the conversation, I feel is a conscious effort on Geralt's part, right? Geralt has a bit of, again, it comes back to his conflicting nature, right?
Yeah.
Well, on one hand, he wants to present himself just as a grunt, right, as a monster killer, mercenary
Hmm.
kind of type. That's the veneer that he wants to show for the world, but he can't avoid being this kind of warrior poet, right? He
Right.
likes to be he likes to be smart in the way he uses his language. He likes to be sarcastic. He likes to try to be witty. So that comes away in a bit in the way he speaks,
Yeah.
especially especially with people that are rubbing him the wrong way, right? That should know
Right.
better. For example, the way he speaks with some clients that ask him for unreasonable stuff, things like that.
Right.
Or when you see this the most actually when he's upset at his friend Dandelion, right? That's when you see he expressing himself, using uh, more florid language.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right, well let's
Yeah.
wrap up here. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I've
Yeah, no, it
loved
was great.
talking about The
It was
Witcher.
fun. Wow, time flew by. It's
Yeah,
been like 2 hours.
I know it really does. Sometimes on the podcast we look at the clock and we're like, "Oh my God, 3 hours have gone by. We got to wrap it
Yeah.
up." But um
Yeah, I think I could do an extra hour, but let's leave it at that. you know, I don't
yeah,
know.
it
I
was
just really like this. I wish more people would pick up these books, but also
yeah.
I understand that they're not easy books, right? I guess that to a point, audiobook probably helps, right? So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a hard series to recommend because when I started reading it, I kind of already knew what I was in for. I knew
Hmm.
that I was going to have to like really pay attention and I was going to have to like kind of wade through,
Yeah,
whatever translation stuff or whatever like audiobook stuff. I knew that that was going to be there. And so I went into it with that expectation and I actually came out of it being like, this was a lot better than I expected in the first place.
yeah.
And so we have a podcast group message thing, and I was telling them, like, I was like, man, I'm already. It was right when I started the third book, and I'm like, I guess I'm just binging the Witcher books. Like, I am loving these.
It's the
And
best way
my
to do
friend,
it.
yeah, and my friend Chris was like, "Oh, so are they really good?" And I'm like, "Yes, they are very good. I'm enjoying them, and I think the game it kind of takes things from the books, and the game is made very much in the spirit of the books. Um, I'm like, however, like it is something that you really have to pay attention to. And then I was talking to Gabe the next day, and he's like, "Do you think I would like them?" And I was like, "Honestly, no, I don't. I don't think that
Yeah,
you would like them because he would be expecting this like action-packed like Geralt of Rivia Witcher book like you know what I mean?
yeah, and it's
And
not right.
I I was like, that's not really
No,
what it is. And so you have to go in with
no,
certain expectations and be willing
yeah,
to just kind of exist in this Witcher world and just kind of see
yeah.
what happens.
It's weird. I mean, I love these books. I'm not sure I would be able to write a book like these, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm my style is more action packed, more
Mm-hmm.
battles, quests, encounters. Go here, do that, etc. The, the Witcher is, people think that they're going to get there because of the video games. They think they're going to be getting, badass swordsmen killing monsters and fighting monsters.
Yeah.
What they get is people wandering around for large stretches of time and
Yeah,
talking with each other,
for
right?
sure.
And then oh, now we're going to spend 3 weeks in a forest. Now we're going to spend 3 weeks, trying to cross this river while two armies are fighting, etc., etc.
Right.
It's more. There's a lot more traveling, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes even someone wandering aimlessly, right?
Right.
And a lot less monster fighting, and that's why I think, again, just to put the cap on that point, right? That there's a big departure. The two books, the short story books are that, right? The two
Right.
short
Yeah.
story books will, for fans of the games, they're excellent.
Sure.
The other five books, that's, as you say, it's a harder recommendation for people who want action packed
Yeah.
stories, right?
Yeah,
But
for
if the
sure.
thought of having just to leave it for your listeners and viewers,
Mm-hmm.
if the thought of reading a story, right, about the family that's a family that split by war and trying to find each other, in a war torn land, if that is a story that appeals to you in a fantasy setting, then you should probably give it a try, because I think
Yeah.
that's a very good description of what the Witcher books are.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Hmm.
And what about the first game? Does that are the characters that we know in that game, or is it mostly like fan fiction Geralt, or is it like a continuation of Ciri's story after Lady of the
Yeah, no,
Lake?
it's the most fan fictiony,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're still trying. It shows that CD Projekt, is trying to twist the book's ending as little as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So they, early on they put the proxy for Siri, right? They find another small child that has elder blood, right? And they
No.
put it in
So
Gerald's
Ciri's not
charge.
even in it.
So Siri exists, right? But Geralt is amnesiac, and for all he knows, Siri has exited the world.
Oh
So
wow.
so yeah, so it's they really, bringing back Ciri, right? What is something that they did for the second game. I'm not even sure that if Triss is in the first game. I want to say that Triss is in the first game, but she might not be. I'm not entirely sure. They really
Wow.
tried to do their very fan fictiony thing with the first game, but
Yeah.
then on the second game they brought in Triss, they brought it, the sorcerers, that they went closer to the books again with
Yeah.
two, and then 1, 3, they're full on, grabbing again, the book's storyline and main themes. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I looked up The Witcher 2 on Steam here, and I'm definitely gonna play it because it really doesn't look as bad
Oh, it
as
looks
I
great.
I thought it would. So yeah, I'm gonna give Witcher 2 a try, and maybe I'll understand some more of the storylines from Witcher 3 through that. So
Yeah, no,
um,
no, it's great, and again, I really think that if you want to have the full, Witcher experience, it really makes sense to do all the books
oh
before
yeah,
moving on to the games, because the games really are sequels to the books,
sure,
right? They need to muddy the end a little bit in order to make it work, right?
yeah,
But it's you really get, if you read the books first, you really get a completely different, well, I wouldn't say completely different, but a very much more complete understanding of the dynamics, right?
right.
In especially in The Witcher 3, but also on 2.
Sure. Okay. Okay, cool. Well, I am going to continue reading the books, like
Mhm.
literally starting tomorrow. I'll continue on with
Yeah.
Blood of Elves. So to any of our viewers, if you want to see me talk about the books as I read them, then let me know in the comments, because that'll kind of help me gauge the level of interest that you guys have in this stuff. So I can either make like one video every now and then talking about the last like two or three Witcher books that I read, or
Mhm.
I can do them as I go. So just let me know what your level of interest in this is. But Luis, thank you so much for hanging out with me and talking Witcher. I have been wanting to do this
Mhm.
all week.
No, it
So
was my
I'm
pleasure.
yeah, it's been awesome because like I said, I was gonna make some sort of video. I was like, maybe I'll just sit in front of a camera and just kind of talk about my thoughts on some of these things. But I'm really glad that I had someone here to do like a full episode with. So thank you so
Yeah, and
much.
I'm looking forward to knowing your thoughts on the further books. Right, I really want to
Hmm.
hear what you think of the Tower of the Swallow, because that book nearly nearly made me stop. With the series.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's a tough one. It's a tough one, but the payback is worth it.
Is it
As I found it out. Yeah,
is it just
so
slow
the
or?
payoff, it's slow, it's meandering,
Mm,
it goes on a lot of tangents, but at the
mm,
end of the day, the payoff is good. The payoff was worth it for me, but
okay.
I can definitely see that it's the biggest hump in the series for sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I will definitely keep you updated as I
Yeah.
continue to go through them. One last time for the audience, what's the name of your series?
Yeah, so my series is Legends of Alesia,
Alicia.
and yeah, you can just try, going to alesia.net, and you should be able to see it. I'll actually, my fans keep saying me that I need to update the website with the latest books, but there's enough there to keep people entertained,
Sure.
right?
Okay. Cool.
So
Well, all of those links will be down in the description. And yeah, we're going to wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with us and listening to us talk about the Witcher just world in general. This has been fantastic. Like I said, let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more of these. Down in the description is his links, and then also our Fantasy Files links, like our Twitter, our Discord, our Patreon, where you can watch these episodes live as we record them and participate in the chat. Upcoming episodes are going to include, I mean, we're pretty much just going to stick to what we've been doing the past few months, which is Harry Potter, Stormlight, We're wrapping up Dresden Files. That is quickly coming to a close. And then we'll be starting King's Dark Tidings very soon here near the beginning of the year. We also have a Kelcade interview coming up, the author of King's Dark Tidings. So
Oh,
stay
nice.
tuned for that. Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm so excited to talk
I
to
love
her
that.
again.
I love those books.
Do you? Okay, I didn't
Yeah.
know that you had read King's Dark Tidings.
Well, I'm going to be honest. I haven't. Again, I don't have a lot of time to read, but I
Sure.
read the first two, and I really love them.
Oh,
Right. I
yeah.
need to move on
Okay.
to the third one.
Yeah, it is my number 2 favorite fantasy series,
Oh,
right
cool.
below Dresden Files. I'm actually getting a King's Dark
Yeah.
Tidings tattoo right here.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
That's so cool.
I'm
Yeah.
super
No.
excited for it.
There was a new book. It was like 6 or 7
Yep,
coming out
it
this year.
it just came out. We read
Yeah.
it and we're going to be discussing it next week.
Nice.
All right. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
so that's what you guys can expect here in the next few weeks, and we will see you then. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye bye.